Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, as you can see, I'm welcoming back Regina Phelps. Regina, welcome back.
Alex, it's a delight to be with you as always.
Oh, you're just saying that.
No, 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 no.
I know we've got a couple of draft topics, but we'll probably just go where it takes us like we always do, if that's
Sure.
okay with you.
For me, babe.
Well, the first thing I wanted to touch on is, without getting into the politics of the whole thing,
Mm.
is the Iran conflict and how that now is starting to show up in other areas more than just gas prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when you peel it back, there's a lot going on. So gas is sort of the big driver. I wouldn't say gas, but oil, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
impact of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, the impact of many nations losing a huge amount of their usual sources of gas and oil is terrifying. And there's a couple of examples I've been thinking about a lot recently, and that is actually in the East. And I'm talking about places like Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, places like that who depend 100% on Iranian oil. Now, I didn't know this, but I listen to a lot of podcasts when I walk here in the city. And there's been one of the economists that I like to listen to is called Money Talks. It's on Tuesdays. And they were talking about what's happening in that part of the world and that's been going on for the last 30 days. And that's this. And think about this as a business person because they are so concerned and they're already starting to get very low on their fuel, their oil, which makes their electricity. So think about a business, think about a high rise, think about anything that would require people to show up. Think about what that costs from a perspective of energy. Someone has to take mass transit or a car to that location that takes lights, air conditioning, or heat. Obviously, you're powering all the computers, etc. So now many offices are only open 1 day a week. People have to work from home.
Yeah.
And that also impacts deliveries. It impacts pretty much everything. So, I mean, we're not experiencing that here in the United States, nor are you in Canada. But think about that. I mean, I was a little surprised that there were people or countries that were so impacted that they were drastically reducing all forms of transit, mandating school closures, mandating office closures, etc. Isn't that kind of amazing or shocking or what do you think?
It is. It's quite surprising that they were that dependent. And
Hmm.
you and I have had conversations about third-party risk management and
Right.
as well. Now, what if you are over here in US and Canada or Western Europe and you're
Hmm.
doing business with some of these places that are
Exactly.
now only open,
Hmm.
the facility anyway, is only open once a week.
Hmm.
People are working from home, but some of those people are going to be impacted as well.
Right.
So now you've got a even more of a ripple effect, and yet
Hmm.
you're not impacted by sitting at home here in, Chicago or San Francisco where you are, or Guelph
Right.
where I am.
Right. Yeah, I was actually shocked by that because you and I have talked about the supply chain disruptions of the Iran war many times. But this concept of actually having this sort of, kind of, several rows down about
Yeah.
where things are actually impacting somebody. And then to your point, what if you utilize them? What if that's your call center in the
Mhm.
Philippines? And then think about how that's going to happen. So I think there's a lot to chew on when you look at the impacts of this particular war, way more than I would have even remotely understood when it first started. I got the idea that there would be a decrease in oil around the world, but I had really no idea of the impact in some locations. And I find that kind of frightening, especially when you understand what the kind of work that we both do and all of our listeners do, which is looking at how to maintain resilience in an organization when there's so many things that you can't control.
Yeah. And in this case, you really can't control. You can't, if you've got a call center in Philippines, like you said,
Mhm.
well, you can't just flip a switch and go get someone else to answer your phones. What are you going to do?
Exactly.
That facility in the Philippines no longer has power. You can't just
Mhm.
flip, oh, I'll just go to a call center in Cambodia. or Thailand
Right,
or whatever. No, it's
right,
not that easy.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Because they're also being impacted by the same thing.
Right. And that was actually, I mentioned the Philippines in particular because many of my clients originally had call centers in the US and then kind of in the 2004, 5, 6s, all the way up to maybe in the 15s, they were all in India. And then that started to become expensive, whatever that means. And then there was a huge migration to the East. And so the Philippines was a very common place to drop call centers because most people speak English. And so I thought that was fascinating because I had no idea that that was actually a thing going on over there. So that was a big surprise to me. But then when you look at also the impact of oil and the loss of that rich supply of Iran, I look at things like airplane costs, which of course, we have the World Cup coming up. So that's another thing to sort of think back in the back of your mind. But I was in Eastern Europe at the end of last month, and when I came back about 2 weeks ago, uh, I was surprised. I was on a 777 on United. The plane was over 50% empty,
Wow.
and I was shocked. I mean, when it went over, it was full. So then I started talking to the flight attendant. I said, I'm kind of surprised because when we went to Europe, um, it was full. And when we came back, it was half empty. He goes, well, that's because Europeans aren't coming to the United States.
Mhm.
Ah, so people in the US are traveling, but no one's coming over here. And I certainly hear that, but I thought that was a real shock that literally a 777 was half empty. And in fact, just walking back, I just would walk the entire length of the plane, to get some stretching. And there were rows in the economy section, like 5 or 6 of the first front rows were completely empty, not a soul in them at all. I
Wow.
was shocked.
Well, I've also heard some of these airlines, because of that, are cutting back on their flights.
Hmm.
So some of the routes are being cut back or removed altogether,
Hmm.
which now means if you do want to go somewhere,
Right.
it's harder to get to where you want to go, when you want to go, with
Hmm.
whom you want to go with,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they don't no longer have a route and they're not providing that anymore.
Hmm.
When that happens, now that means there's cut back to work.
Hmm.
So people aren't working as much, which means they don't have as much money, which means they're not spending as much.
Right.
And then
Right.
tourism and all these other ripples,
Hmm.
are starting to now show up.
Right. Yeah, because now we're 2+ months into it. And so, the first month in particular, there was really, I mean, the gas prices went up, yes, but there wasn't a lot of other visible impacts. Month number two, there was more things that were visible. Month number three is actually, we're going into month three or into month three. It's really quite surprising to me. And this could go on for a lot longer, I think. Iran seems very committed to not giving in to Trump, and I think that's if you're kind of headstrong and you can actually suffer through it, which it seems like they can at this point, this could go on for a lot longer, and I think that's really concerning.
Well, then you mentioned earlier too, with the World Cup, there's
Yes.
going to be so many people, hopefully, traveling, but that may impact the world's largest single event
Hmm.
now because they won't be able to
Right.
afford travel, which means the hotels
Right.
that were really counting on being sold out for a couple of weeks, that's going
Hmm.
out the window now.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and then I'll think of all the cascading things behind that. Restaurants, stores, retail, everything is going to be impacted. And I think even if the war resolves, it's going to take a long time for the prices to come back down. And many forecasters I've seen say at least it's not going to go down quickly. You're looking at probably a 60 to 90 day, maybe even longer, sort of a sloping of costs because all of that expensive oil is in the pipeline and it's going to take a while for that all to be dispersed. And so it's not going to be a quick flip of the switch. So I think, we're at the end of April. I could see that all through the summer even if it stopped, like, in a few weeks, it's still going to have a huge impact.
Yeah. And in some of these places too that need this oil, around the world, that's also going to be preventing people from moving or
Right.
causing like movement, I should say, not moving, but movement, tourism or just trips, day trips, those kind of things. But it also strives what you've brought up on the show before about
Mm-hmm.
people movement
Mm-hmm.
because the economics are so bad now where they are that
Mm-hmm.
creates people movement. So
Migration.
we could end up with another migration issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think whenever you look at any kind of instability, and that results in increased costs, people losing their jobs, fuel more expensive, food more expensive, they can't pay their rent, blah, 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 then you do have migration. So you certainly have seen that in Africa. Certainly have seen it in Asia. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that in general because things are becoming incredibly expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're at a tipping point on a very uh, dangerous point here.
Mm-hmm.
If things don't change soon, who knows what could happen? I'm not going to rattle off what will or won't happen just in case. But
Don't stick your neck out, right?
yeah, exactly, just in case. But there are now that we are seeing, and for the most part, a lot of us now are feeling
Yeah.
that impact. When before it was something over there, but this
Hmm.
just proves what we in our industry have been saying all along.
Absolutely.
Sometimes something small on the other side of the world finds its way to
Hmm.
us. So we have to know our third parties. We have to know our contingencies. We have to create that resilience,
Hmm.
put our organizations and ourselves on a path of resilience now.
Hmm. And I think the longer this goes on, let's say that all of our colleagues are very attuned to what you and I have talked about forever as far as planning and having sufficient backup. But if this goes on longer and longer, let's say you have a primary source of where you get a certain thing for, making your widgets, let's say, and then you've listened to us and now you have a secondary one. You have a primary one, you have a secondary one. But as this continues to go on, you might need a tertiary one, or maybe even somebody beyond that, because again, because of the impact of these resources being limited, then those things being able to be produced that you buy might actually become even more difficult to obtain. So I think when you look at our profession, the idea of supply chain resilience, we've talked about a lot since COVID, but this is like that on steroids, I think.
Yeah. Well, yes, because if you've got your primary who's experiencing some issues, so you go find a secondary. Well,
Hmm.
that primary is experiencing the issues because of what's happening, in certain places in the world. There are
Exactly.
more than one conflict. Well, that other new one that you just found is starting to experience the exact same things.
Exactly. Exactly. And you could have like you need to have three or four in order to be able to get what you're making. And then people may not be able to buy what you're making because of
Yeah.
costs. So it is all attached, and you can sort of see this. It's kind of like watching a wreck or automobile accident in slow motion, right? In the sense of how
I shouldn't
one
laugh
thing
at that.
begins to impact the other, and impact the other, and impact the other. And you can see that the supply chain issues, the increasing costs, impacts people's unwillingness to spend, which then impacts what people are actually buying, which impacts that you don't need to make all those widgets anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then you end up having, a significant economic shock, which can not cause a recession. Um, and that would be, I mean, if we avoid a recession in all of this, the longer this goes on, I will be shocked because we've had 60 days of increasing prices and kind of this contraction, if you will, of the economy. And the longer this goes on, that's going to certainly lead to, I would think, and looking at certainly, I read the Wall Street Journal every day and the Economist, and they're talking about, if we're lucky, we won't have one, but the chances of us being lucky is beginning to shrink on
Yeah,
a rather daily basis.
yeah, I think so. And just to think, it all just started with, someone being upset with someone else
Right,
or
right.
assuming someone else was doing something, shall we
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
Just leave it at that. We're not a political show, so I'm not gonna go into that. But it just started there, and look what's happening now.
Hmm.
And more as time goes by, more and more impacts are being seen, thought
Hmm.
about, because
Yep.
some of the ones, nobody thought the airlines were going to cut their routes,
Right. Right.
because of what happened there. But now that's happening. So that, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
with the World Cup, hotel staff now
Hmm.
have to start being, they're worried because they're
Right.
not going to have the guests
Hmm.
to book out their rooms anymore. The restaurants, and all the FIFA venues for the World Cup, you know,
Yep.
all of this is now getting impacted, and then that
Right.
strains relationships within communities. You start seeing the divide with the haves and the have-nots, and that starts to create civil issues.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's really a can of worms in many ways, and every day that goes by, more opportunities for disruption occur, and that's what I think those of us in our profession should be thinking about every single day, because it sort of ties back to if all of these things happen, the economy gets tighter. What does that mean for people in our jobs?
Yeah.
You and I've talked about that. Oh my gosh, many times.
Hmm.
And I just pray that people in our profession are really paying attention to all of these things, even though they may think, oh gosh, I'm not really responsible for this and that. But the broader your view can be, then you should be thinking creatively every single day. What can we be doing? How can I be approaching this? How can I be informing people? How can we be, playing a game, if you will, the war game of, well, if this happens and that happens, then what do we do then? The idea is that again, what I've talked about ad nauseum, which is how do you provide value in the work that we do every single day? And the idea is that your vision should be broad. You should be looking, and I mean, my God, we have BIAs that say how all of this is connected. So we should be really clear by looking at those continuity plans, those BIAs, and then being able to extrapolate, what's the next thing that's going to happen, and the thing after that, and the thing after that. And maybe those other things never happen. But as we've been talking about, as this war continues, it has really far-reaching effects, and the next domino falls, and then the next domino falls. And that's what we in our profession should be thinking about every single day.
Yeah, how many dominoes have to fall before there aren't any left? Is that the time when you're going to realize, okay, now I'll think about these things? No,
Right. Do it.
I think it was actually with you where I said before that our industry, we're at a point right now, we have one heck of an opportunity to really promote
Absolutely.
who we are, or we're going to miss
Absolutely.
it. And again, we're going to show that we don't have value. We're not
Right.
stepping up.
Right, right. And this is, I mean, I've lectured on this. Actually, I went back and looked at when I first talking about value on investment, and our particular work was in 2002. And so, I mean, I've been beating this thing for 23, 24 years. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I just beg people to think about this because we could show that we have a lot of value. And when they start looking about how to shrink the balance sheet, they wouldn't think of shrinking you because you have actually provided value in the business. But if you're not doing that, they may need continuity plans, but when was the last time it was activated? And, they're just going to be fine without you.
And that's the way they'll think. When was the last time we needed it?
Exactly.
You know,
Which is why return on investment doesn't work
yeah,
because most of my clients never activate, or if they activate, it's small, but rarely do they actually fully activate their plans.
yeah, exactly. Any final thoughts you'd like to share, or do you think we've
I think we've done a good job of sort of covering all that, but what I would really say to folks is to really expand the vision. I know that we're all really busy, but I would really encourage you to really broadly look across the world every day on news sources. Use our favorite tool, Google
Google
Alerts,
Alerts?
right? And if you know Yeah, and if you know where your vendors are around the world, you could put in the name of the country. Let's say it's India, and then you could actually put in some other things, and then maybe a couple of other countries you might be concerned about, and then begin to sort of get your arm around what's actually happening in the big supply chain of the world so that you could be actually serving that up to people. And the more that you can actually be proactive, providing information, showing the kind of value, the kind of thinking you're doing, tying it all together,
Yeah.
then when people start getting laid off, you won't be one of them.
I think the piece that people forget or maybe aren't aware of is I know we've talked about using Google Alerts to find out, with events and things like that.
Mhm.
But if you can use that, it should help you and can help you learn your business so
Oh,
that you can
absolutely.
identify why am I talking about this forest fire in Uganda? Why am I
Mhm.
bringing that to your attention? Because, and
Yes.
if you've got all the information at your fingertips in your BIA or risk assessment, whatever it is, wherever you've captured it, you can
Mhm.
point, that's a risk because of
Yes.
these three things here identified. And they're going to, how'd you make that link? Here's why, blah, 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 blah. We didn't know that.
How about that?
Exactly. There's your
Right.
value.
Right, right. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, so you make a widget that requires 20 things. Well, number 19 and 20 are happen to be in this particular country, which now has this particular problem. And that sort is only blah, 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 but only sourced in those locations, whatever. The idea is that the more that you can do that, that you can provide value. Because if you're not doing that, first of all, who is if it's not you? And then secondarily, you're not actually helping to your company as far as you could, and you are again at risk because you're not showing that you have anything to offer except how to do a BIA and some business continuity plans.
Yeah. And if you're not making that link and you're not pointing these things out, then what are you doing?
Right,
Period.
right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, Regina, thank you so much for chatting with me again today. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much.
And as I said once before, one of these days we will get to talk about bunnies and rainbows.
Oh my gosh, you've been telling me that for how many years have we been doing this?
Far too many.
Thanks again, my friend.